Chase Young. Can I interest you guys in Chase Young? He's available right now. And the Detroit Lions do have depth at their defensive line, of course. But you can't turn away a guy like Chase Young. Even coming off an ACL injury, I don't know what the asking price would be. And I'm going to put a poll in the chat for everybody else to participate. But Sam Flannel, when you see Chase Young's available, because listen, we had this conversation with DeAndre Hopkins, and at least DeAndre's a free agent, so you just sign him. But if we're talking DeAndre Hopkins or Chase Young's intriguing.
Chase Young is absolutely intriguing. You know what's funny about him too? In the 2020 draft, he was the guy that if he would have actually fell to the Lions at 3, I think I would have done backflips, because Chase Young, and Lucas, you're an Ohio State fan, you understand how good of a prospect he was. I think coming out, he was even better than Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa as a prospect. But the problem with Chase Young is he's had some injury issues throughout his career. But people shouldn't forget, though, how good he actually was in 2020 when he was Defensive Rookie of the Year, a Pro Bowler. He had 7.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 12 quarterback hits, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, including a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Chase Young, I think he's a guy that, obviously, in the past couple of years, he's played 12 out of a possible 34 games. And in those 12 games, he only has a sack and a half, which brings his career total to 9 in 27 games, which that's not great. That doesn't scream to me a dominant defensive lineman. But I also think the last couple of years he's battled injuries,
yes.
Especially last season. He was never fully healthy and on the field. He was only on the field for 3 games. And imagine Chase Young, sort of a guy right now who is seen as a little bit of a depreciated asset. He's still on his rookie contract. Imagine if Chase Young actually has a career renaissance in Detroit. Chase Young on one end and Aiden Hutchinson on the other, and then James Houston in that rotation as well. We're looking at potentially... Think about that if they all reach their potential. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson already had a dominant rookie season. James Houston had a dominant rookie season.
Yes.
And then you put Chase Young, all of them together, they could be a 3-headed monster at the pass rush position that could give quarterbacks nightmares for the future.
And I think Chase Young, when healthy, is or can be. I at least haven't seen it. His rookie year was dominant, but we haven't seen him really take off. He's been unhealthy the last 2 years. And now he's going into the last contract or last year of his deal. They declined his 5th-year option in Washington. There's a risk there, and I'll tell you why. Because Funky, and he laid it out perfectly. He says, WoodwardSports.com, Jeff, no, the reason I'd rather sit on all the extra cap space right now is so it carries over and they can use the extra $20 million to help keep this core together. I'm actually 100% with Funky. Although it's intriguing for Chase Young and again, for a depreciating asset like Chase Young, who coming out of college was the best defensive end in college football, period. I would love that. Ohio State, Michigan, combining forces on the Lions, and Chase Young and Aiden Hutchinson terrorizing quarterbacks and the NFC and AFC if they make the Super Bowl. But if we really talk about like what it would cost if he does play well, Sam, it's a lot of money. And you got Jonah Jackson. If they want to extend Goff, there's that. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell coming down the pipeline. Like there's a lot of guys they're gonna have to pay. So part of me is super intrigued, but then the other part of me is, I'd rather keep the other guys and keep this core together. Because again, if Chase Young, if he was a little older and he was already on a deal, or you can get him a little cheaper, not only are you going to have to trade for him, but you're going to have to extend him as well. And that's where I get pushed away a little bit.
Yeah, that is absolutely fair. And imagine if they're able to acquire Chase Young and he does have that breakout season, especially given his talent, given what he did his rookie year, he would obviously ask for a bag. So Chase Young, you never know. Even if you do get him this year and you don't want to extend him, he might be a little bit of a rental. I get what you're saying. Financially, in terms of being fiscally responsible, Chase Young might be seen as a little bit of a luxury, given the fact that at the defensive end position, the Detroit Lions, that's actually one of their stronger positions.
Yeah, the question is how much are the Commanders asking for Chase Young? That's probably my question, because if it's low and it's not expensive and you could get Chase Young on a little bit of a bargain, I don't mind taking a 1-year flyer on him. But Sam, if you have to trade away at least somewhat valuable assets or draft capital, go get Chase Young, and you can't re-sign him, it's a 1-year rental, essentially, for a guy who hasn't been healthy the last 2 years.
So if not the Lions, then who?
Well,
You're seeing the Steelers are reportedly in on Chase Young, which I think that makes a lot of sense for Chase Young as well to go play for Mike Tomlin would be great. JB, help me out here. Voice of reason. You're Brad Holmes. You picking up the phone? You calling? You trying to get Chase Young or what?
I'm definitely going to call and see what the asking price is. From what I've heard, that it's probably around a third or fourth round pick, which honestly, I'm not bad with just giving that over for Chase Young. No, honestly, what do you guys think? Third, fourth round pick?
I mean, that's, if you look at it, I guess, in Brad Holmes' language, third round pick, you're basically trading Kirby Joseph. So he got him in the third round. But Lucas, you're freaking out over there, dude. Toledo, he's in the booth with his coffee. What are your thoughts? Chase Young, you want him?
If Chase Young is on the trade block for a third or fourth round pick, and at the bare minimum, it means you're taking a risk on him for a year. And we're doing the same thing with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So, and James Houston contract comes up at the end of the year. So now you're giving yourself a weapon for a low price for what he is, because not only is Chase Young an elite pass rusher, but the dude's dominant in the run game as well. So now you have two dominant rush stoppers on the edge with Hutch and Chase Young, and then you have Aleem McNeil and Isaiah Buggs. So that's helping our run game to begin with. James Houston, as much as a good pass rusher as he is, he's not like that in the run game. As he can develop that, but you don't know that if he leaves. C.J. Gardner-Johnson could be leaving. So if you get Chase Young for a cheap deal, both those guys leave, and now you have a chance to re-sign Chase Young. That helps your defense out phenomenally for years to come with Hutch on the other side, especially with Kirby in the back.
And think about what Chase would do, and I'm just talking hypothetically, what Chase would do to this defense, just as a whole. You look at the secondary and how much better it got from last year. You could argue as a secondary on paper, Sam, I would say they're a top 10 unit, and you could make an argument for them in the top 10 just on paper. Imagine getting Chase Young on this defensive line. You like the defensive line, right? Houston, Aiden, Aleem McNeil, even Levi when he comes back. There's a lot of depth there. But Chase Young would walk in as arguably your second or best defensive end. Think about that. And Aiden and Chase Young with this secondary, it is a risk, but the question is Brad Holmes willing to take their risk? And I haven't really seen Brad do that in his tenure with the Lions yet. He hasn't taken a risk like that yet.
Yeah, no.
So what makes me be convinced that he'll do that now?
That's the question, because we're not Brad Holmes. And I think me and Lucas, and I will be fair, I really, really like Chase Young as a player. Even as a Michigan fan, he's one of my favorite Ohio State Buckeyes ever, and I still can't forget what he did his rookie year, and I think it's gotten undervalued. And Lucas is absolutely right. You mentioned something, even in the past couple of years when Chase Young has had injury-plagued seasons, he's put up pretty piddly sack numbers over the past couple of years. That's just I'm just being real. He grades out very high in run defense, even in his injury-plagued years. And that is something that the Detroit Lions obviously still need help with, given the fact that the defensive line, I think, is still a little bit of a question mark on the interior. You might want to get a guy like Chase Young who can provide very, very good edge, like pass rush off the edge, run stopping off the edge, and maybe even play all along the defensive line. Chase Young, don't get it twisted, is a physical freak. He's got all the size and the speed. He's got everything you could want out of a defensive end. His problem has just been availability. So, like Lucas said, if the asking price is a third or fourth round pick, even as a chance for just a rental, even if you don't want to extend him, I absolutely would take it. 100 times out of 100. And I know that I'm that's why you're not Brad Holmes. I know it's going to come into the chat right now, but a lot of people seem to forget and are sleeping on Chase Young. He's become another one of those guys who's been a little bit of a that guy was never good anyway. In his rookie year, he only had 7.5 sacks, but he was also defensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
The pendulum has to swing back to where people all of a sudden don't think Chase Young is trash anymore. That's the type of stuff that I keep seeing, and I don't like it.
And right now in the poll, so the Lions trade for Chase Young, you go join in on our YouTube chat thread or woodwardsports.com. It's 50-50 right now. And Gabby, I want to ask you, Brad Holmes, is this something Brad you think would be willing to do? Do you see Brad taking a risk like this? Or no? He'll just probably stay put and keep the team he has right now together.
Everything is clicking right now.
Yeah.
He would really have to move Brad, I feel like, in a way, in the room.
Yeah.
One-on-one. He would have to have such a fantastic conversation and have a fantastic time with the team if that's available, and be able to see that chemistry, him in the building, for it to happen. Based off of his track record, when we're looking at what he's previously said, if they want a lot for him, there is no way, because he's not willing to spend big money on big players And does he even fall under that really big player category right now? So if he's saying he's not willing to spend big money on big players, is he willing to spend big money on a player that could potentially flop with injuries based off of his track record?
And Chase says on WoodwardSports.com, he says, Young and Hutch would be the best pass rush combo in the division, makes the D-line closer to a top position group in the conference, which again, yeah, ding, ding, ding for that. Because you look at just the big picture in the NFC, the Eagles and the 49ers, that defense, those defensive lines are in a different stratosphere than the Lions. The Lions have a good defensive line on paper. I think they could be really good. But Sam, like to get to that realm of defensive lines, you don't think Chase Young would absolutely help that. So to your point,
Chase Young would put you closer to that level than anybody wants to admit. And that's fact, especially if Chase Young actually reaches his potential with the Detroit Lions. This is all hypothetical. They could even have a better high-end defensive line than the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I understand that people are gonna hear that and not like it, but when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers, it's mainly Nick Bosa. They don't really have that second-star defensive end. And when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles, Brandon Graham is getting a little bit old. Hassan Reddick, he's obviously was elite last year, but I don't know if he's going to be able to keep that up because his past will show that he's very, very good, but not elite. I'm all in on, you know what? I am all in on the bring Chase Young to Detroit train.
Well, there you have it.
I love Chase Young.
There you have it. For me, and I'll just close it on this, I wouldn't be mad if he was the line. I'll just say that. I just don't see it happening. I don't think Brad would make that type of deal. Not that Chase is a bad player or anything, but there is risk involved in that deal, doing it. And then you have him for 1 year. I don't see Brad doing it, but of course, JB, if he does it, I'm going to be the first one to come on here and be excited about it. We're back. Thanks for sticking with us. Morning Woodward Show here on the Woodward Sports Network. Almost into the second hour of the show. Jeff Iafredi, Sam Flannel, JB, Alex, and Lucas in the TD booth. And I saw this list yesterday, and I didn't know how to feel about it. So I sat down, I read it, I digested it, and now I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. PFF came out with a wide receiver ranking for the corp, the receiving corps and rankings throughout the NFL. And I'm going to go through some of these teams, and we'll get to the Lions. But first, I just want to give some context to where they have some teams. So obviously, number one, the Cincinnati Bengals, speaking of Joe Burrow. I think we could agree there. I think as a wide receiver core, they're the best in the league on paper. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
Okay. Number two, the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that's fair. No problems yet.
No problems.
Okay, Miami Dolphins at 3, San Francisco 49ers at 4, 5, Seattle, 6, Dallas, 7, Minnesota. Now, here's the problem. Minnesota at 7, and just stay with me here because this will make sense when I get to it. Minnesota's at 7, and I'll just give you an idea who's behind them. Buffalo at 9, Tampa Bay at 10, Kansas City obviously at 11, which, it is what it is.
They're counting tight ends.
Yeah, if they are, then makes sense. Los Angeles Chargers at 12. Now, mind you, do you hear what I just said? The Los Angeles Chargers are at 12. The Minnesota Vikings are at 7. Okay, so stay with me here. I know this doesn't make any sense, but it's according to PFF. And PFF, as much as I like utilizing it at times, it's not something I often depend on all the time because of stuff like this. And I want to read the Minnesota Vikings, the reasoning why they put the Vikings at 7. They said, thank Justin Jefferson for the Vikings ranking in the top 10. Outside of Jefferson, Minnesota has TJ Hockenson at tight end, a viable option for him. But then it's KJ Osborne, Jalen Reagor, and rookie Jordan Addison. Okay, and again, I like Jordan Addison. KJ Osborne, solid. TJ is TJ. But again, 7? Better than the Los Angeles Chargers? And you'll see where they have the Lions ranked in a second. We'll get down. So 12, Los Angeles Chargers. 13, the Chicago Bears. Okay. Chase Claypool last season did almost as much as I did for the Bears with their wide receiver core. He wasn't very productive, but regardless, they're at 13. Los Angeles Rams at 14. Ravens at 15. 16, the Jaguars. 17, Broncos. And then it gets down, and then you get into the 20s, and the Lions come in at 23. 23. And I'll read their description for why they have the Lions at 23. They said, Amon-Ra St. Brown took a step into the elite category. Interesting. I agree with that, actually. But 23 and he's elite. Earning a 90.4 receiving grade last season. Detroit moved on from TJ Hockenson via trade in the middle of last year, but they have Marvin Jones Jr., Josh Reynolds, and added rookie Sam Laporta, who is sure to have a decent part of their passing game. Do you notice they didn't even mention Jameson Williams in here? Not even one mention of Jameson Williams. And again, I don't know if it's because he's suspended or they just forgot he's on the Lions. But if Jameson Williams is healthy, there's no way in hell they're 23rd in the NFL on paper. Because if you're telling me that Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, these guys can elevate their wide receiver cores into top 10, top 12, you can't tell me the Lions are 23rd in the NFL with their wide receiver core. And I'll tell you who's behind them. Okay, Atlanta Falcons are 24, which, at this point, I guess, I think in a couple years they'll be even higher than that with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, now Bijan playing receiver at times. 25, the New York Giants. 26, the Colts. 27, the Packers. 28, the Cardinals. 29, the Patriots. 30, Tennessee Titans. 31, Carolina, and 32, Houston Texans. So that's who's behind the Detroit Lions. But Sam, when you first hear that the Lions are ranked 23rd according to PFF, and they don't even mention Jameson Williams, and you have teams like Chicago, top 15, you have Minnesota, 7th. What do you make of it?
So when I first saw this list and when I first saw the ranking, obviously I had the same reaction as you. 23 does sound a little bit crazy, especially given the fact that I think we both agree, and pretty much universally around Detroit, that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a star. We don't have to worry about him for the next almost approaching a decade. I think that he is going to be one of the best Detroit Lions wide receivers of all time when it's all said and done. And that's all well and good. I think that's 100% agreement amongst Detroit right now. And then you look, they mentioned Marvin Jones, who is a solid offseason pickup, although not in his prime. They mentioned Josh Reynolds, who is another solid receiver, but nothing really to write home about, although Jared Goff obviously likes him. They mentioned Sam Laporta, who is their rookie tight end, who the Lions obviously expect big things from, which is fair. That's why you draft a tight end that high, especially when they're going to need him to be tight end number 1. But no mention whatsoever of Jameson Williams. Great minds think alike, Jeff, because that just it really stood out when I read that article. But what also stands out to me is that if they're just disregarding Jameson Williams, 23 is not really that egregious. And Jameson Williams, despite what we all think about him, despite his enormous potential, despite him as a prospect, despite what he did at Alabama in his 1 year as a starter, in which he was one of the best and most dynamic college football players I have ever seen. He was that good. I thought the Lions were very, very fortunate to be able to draft him, and the only reason they were able to do that is because Brad Holmes traded up, and Jameson Williams had an ACL injury in the college football playoffs, so you pretty much knew that he was going to miss the majority of his first season. Despite all of that, Jameson Williams hasn't really shown a whole lot on the field. And even no matter how stupid you think the suspension is, and as more details come out, it appears to be an even more egregious suspension than we even thought before. Jameson Williams is going to spend pretty much his first 23 games as an NFL player basically doing a whole lot of nothing, having one reception. I get it was for a touchdown, but people act like he only played a game or two. He played 6 games and only had 1 reception, and then he had a carry. He only touched the ball twice. So does PFF just completely disregard Jameson Williams? Is Jameson Williams even thought about on a national level, or is he an afterthought at this point?
Well, the problem I have is if you're going to go that route and you're not going to include Jameson Williams or Jahmyr Gibbs, and shout out to the Woodward Sports beat writer for the Detroit Lions, Matt Broder, my guy. He just posted an article about this whole topic. It's in the chat. You can check that out and read it. And he had some interesting things to say in this article as well. But if you're not going to mention Jameson Williams, and why mention Jordan Addison for the Vikings? He hasn't played. And technically, JMO has 1 more reception than he does in the NFL, and he's still not mentioned. Jordan Addison is mentioned. And they didn't even mention Jahmyr Gibbs, who we expect to play a lot in the slot, at wide receiver. They've been moving him around all over the place at minicamp and OTAs. That's my problem, is the inconsistencies. What are we doing? If you're not going to mention JMO, who's an NFL player, and yes, he was suspended, he was hurt last season, but did the guy get any slower? Like, does he suck now? I mean, he still has the same talent he had when he came out. He just hasn't been available. But Jordan Addison hasn't even touched an NFL field yet, and he's mentioned in the Vikings rankings, and they're ranked at 7.
Come on, bro. What are we doing?
That's the problem I have, Sam, is if they're going to go that route, then why include Jordan Addison, who hasn't even played yet?
Because Jordan Addison doesn't have the same amount of career receptions as gambling suspensions. I guess Jordan Addison has 0, but Jameson Williams, he played in 6 games. Let's not act like he didn't play at all. And obviously the Lions were, I would say, keeping it safe with Jameson Williams. They didn't want him to get re-injured, and Jameson Williams did make a big touchdown catch, which was called back. And I did mention the carry that he had for 41 yards, and he did beat a defensive back deep, I believe, in the Jets game, and Jared Goff underthrew him. You obviously see that Jameson Williams has a ton of talent. But Jordan Addison, he hasn't suffered an injury. He hasn't had a chance to be on the field. With Jameson Williams, you've at least seen when he was on the field this year with the Detroit Lions, he was an afterthought. In a lot of ways, he was a decoy. That's the reality of the situation. Jameson Williams was brought here to catch the football, and I still believe when he comes back, he will be great because he better be. But he didn't do anything his rookie year. I'm sorry. A lot of people aren't going to like that, but he didn't do a damn thing. I don't care about every time he touched the ball, it went for 40 yards. All 2 of them, 1 reception. That's not good enough. Do I love his talent? Yes. Does he have a resume in the NFL? Abso-freaking-lutely not, and you cannot deny that.
Well, I think saying that he did absolutely nothing is a stretch. I think when he came back, his chemistry with Jared Goff clearly wasn't there, and his strengths, which is stretching the field, Jared, they couldn't connect initially. But to say he did absolutely nothing in the limited times he touched the ball, they were all explosive plays. So imagine an offseason where those 2 guys can work together and J-Mo can get implemented into the offense. You'd hope those explosive plays would become more consistent. At least he showed something. To say he did nothing, I think, is a stretch.
Well, and for the record, before anybody comes at me with a gotcha when Jameson Williams ultimately comes back and is a star, I believe that it's going to happen. My point is that it hasn't happened yet, and the fact that PFF isn't even acknowledging Jameson Williams' existence on the Lions wide receiving core, yeah, it's egregious, but at the same time, why would they? Jameson Williams is going to spend his first 23 games as an NFL player with 1 reception. That is just the reality.
Well, we technically, at least I can speak for myself. I didn't expect J-Mo to play really at all last year.
That's fine.
So, when you say in 2 years, the suspension I understand, but Calvin Ridley was suspended last season. He's mentioned in the PFF list, but he also has a track record in the NFL.
1,000-yard
so
season.
That's fair. But the point is, for J-Mo, no, I don't think anybody expected him to come in his rookie year off an ACL injury and just explode onto the NFL scene. At least I didn't think so, especially when the Lions at that time were winning games. So there's more pressure on them to keep that thing going, and then you implement J-Mo into the offense. Yeah, they targeted him. It didn't work out initially, but still, Sam, in the limited sample size, he had the football. When the football was in his hands, it was huge plays, explosive plays. And imagine if that was more on a consistent basis. And that was with Jared and J-Mo with literally no chemistry. Little to no chemistry. And now they have an offseason. So we'll see this upcoming season. I think this PFF list is blasphemous to have the Lions at 23rd with no mention of J-Mo or Jahmyr Gibbs. But they mentioned Sam Laporta. It doesn't make any sense. And you can argue that without J-Mo this season, the first 6 games, I am a little concerned. Absolutely. I want to see what happens with Reynolds, Marvin Jones, those guys stepping up, the rookies as well. But when this receiving core is healthy, you ain't telling me they're 23rd in the NFL.
And I agree
That's
with
ridiculous.
you. I agree with you 100%. I think they're going to be, I don't know, at best top half in the NFL, especially if Jameson Williams actually reaches his potential. If he becomes what we all think that he can be, then to me, his potential, his ceiling is absolutely limitless. I expect him to be the type of wide receiver that can put up consistent seasons like Jalen Waddle did last year, just a yak king, because Jameson Williams, he's not just some speed guy. He was a very polished and refined receiver at Alabama, and I would like to see him run the whole route tree, not just run go routes like he did for most of last season. So I think Jameson Williams will be great, and when he is great, we will be talking about this Detroit Lions receiving core as having a 1-2 punch in Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown that can eventually rival any 1-2 punch in the NFL. But the time is not right now. And all I'm saying is the fact that PFF didn't even acknowledge him, I want to play this whole they don't respect the Lions thing, but can you respect 1 career NFL catch and a gambling suspension, which is egregious, by the way? I know a lot of you are going to come at me, which is egregious, but it is happening, and he is going to miss the first 6 games.
Yeah, that is a fact. Unfortunately, he's going to, but I think when he gets back, maybe a little rust, but it should be full go for JMO. I know he'll be eased in, but he has now the offseason to work. He's healthy right now, so I don't expect these conversations about JMO and the question marks we have to continue a year from now. I just don't. It is a great day. It's always a great day the day after the draft. We got Sam Flannel. Sam, before we get into
anything. How you feeling this morning?
You know what? I'm feeling great. One of the biggest honors so far that since I've been at Woodward Sports is getting to do the draft day reaction with Woodward Pistons' own Jeff Iafrate. Didn't I just see you on TV last night for what, like 5 straight hours? What are you, like the Truman Show now? You're on every show ever.
Yeah, well, I was helping out the heavies. I was doing audio for them, and then we did the NBA draft show. And again, anybody who tuned into that, we appreciate you. They continued the live on Woodward Pistons over in Studio B, but it was a blast, man. Sitting there, obviously covering the NBA draft. I feel like this is every single year where you talk about 15 different prospects. You just want to get to the draft.
Oh, yeah.
You just want to find out who the Pistons are selecting. And we got our answer. It's Ausar Thompson, 5th overall. They stayed put. Troy Weaver didn't trade back. He didn't trade up. And there you go. Ausar Thompson listed him as a shooting guard / small forward. He's a wing in the NBA, 6'7", 220. And again, this is some guy that was mocked to the Pistons plenty of times. It was rumored, Amen and him. The first brothers, I believe, in NBA history to be top 5 picks.
Wow.
Twin brothers. Safe to say they're better than the Morris twins, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, back-to-back, 4 and 5, that's a more unbelievable story than I think is being covered.
Yeah.
Twin brothers, one at number 4, one at number 5. That is a night that they certainly will never forget. And we certainly hope that Ausar Thompson turns out to be the right pick for the Detroit Pistons. It was very promising, of course.
Yes, it was. And again, Troy Weaver does a really good job at hinting at things before the draft. He does this. It's very subtle. And when he had his pre-draft presser, and one thing that stuck with me is that long ball comment. Like, that isn't nothing. That's something. Him hinting, I don't want to just bunt. I want to go for the long ball. That entails that he's not just going to settle for a player that fits the best. He wants to swing for the fences, which, again, could work out. But also it could not, like any other draft pick. So as much as we may be excited, there is a chance. And there's a lot of pressure on Troy for this draft pick to pan out. But again, in my opinion, if you look at what he said, going for the long ball, Sam, this was the guy. Left on the board, Troy said it. Ausar's been our guy for quite some time now. And he obviously, none of that stuff gets out. But we kind of knew that. He became the favorite or close to the favorite right before the draft. And again, I think his comments match Ausar. Ausar's upside, and I don't think people understand too, it's not just the athleticism. It's not just the size. Like, and I know people bring up shooting, and we'll get to all that stuff later in the show because I do understand the concerns there. But he brings so much, and that's why you take a risk on a guy like that, because you know if he can figure it out, he can be a dude in the NBA. He can be.
Absolutely. And I've come to appreciate Troy Weaver's transparency when it came to saying he wanted to go for the long ball and not just settle for a double or a bunt. And Ausar Thompson, whether you like him or not, whether you're concerned about his shooting or not, he is a high upside prospect. And if he hits, he might end up being one of the better picks in this draft. There's also the concern with him missing, the concern about his shot, and all of that is all good and valid. But right now, he at least went. I can't fault a guy for swinging for the fences, and that feels like what Troy Weaver did with Ausar Thompson. So I'm not mad about it. I'm not super excited or anything, but I definitely have talked myself into it. And Jeff Iafrate, I'm sure you'll talk me more into it further on.
And again, with Ausar too, you have to understand here. With you look at the pick itself and the prospect of Ausar Thompson, the athleticism, he's going to be a day one pretty elite defender. Like, at least there's that. The shooting, like, we talk about this team needs shooting. They need guys that can defend, specifically on the wing. So I get the whole, well, we need shooters. I knew there was something to them being interested in Jeremy Grant and Tobias Harris. There was something to that. Guys that can play the 4, that can shoot the ball. That kind of, as much as we didn't really look into it, it kind of spoke to what they were looking for. And again, you get a guy day one who could be a great defender. And just to go through Ausar Thompson really quickly, and I want to give kind of a backstory. He obviously played at Overtime Elite. Again, a 2-time Overtime Elite champion. Both seasons he played there, and he picked up the Finals MVP award in both of those of those seasons as well. Troy Weaver said it himself. Even before the Overtime Elite League, these guys were top 5. They were lottery picks. They were top 5 picks. And even after Overtime Elite, they got much better. So for people saying, well, you draft these guys out of Overtime Elite, this is the new age of the NBA now. Like, it's not just, I know typically it's always been college. You draft guys out of college or overseas. There's so many other options, Sam. You got G League Ignite. You got the Overtime Elite League. Like, guys can showcase their skills no matter where they go. And in the NBA draft, compared to other drafts, you draft on potential. And I think Asar, if you're talking about potential, has the highest upside of anybody else in that draft spot. I mean, yes, the players that were left on the board, I mean, could you have taken Taylor Hendricks, my guy? Of course. But I understand the philosophy for Troy Weaver. I understand trying to take a swing on a guy like Asar Thompson. And again, you talk about fit. There is that fit part that plays into this as well, because Asar with Amen, they've played together their entire lives, but Asar's always played off of Amen. He's always played off ball. So the fit, he's going to get used to playing right with Cade and Jaden Ivey. And Troy said it himself. In today's NBA, you need multiple guys that can make plays with the basketball. That's the truth. As much as I like Taylor Hendricks, he ain't making plays off the dribble like Asar Thompson. He just isn't.
No.
So in the modern day NBA, I think it's a great fit. If he can figure his shot out or at least be respectable, he's going to be a great player. He will be.
Well, that, of course, is the key with Asar Thompson. And to be fair, obviously we know that his shooting percentages were not pretty in the Overtime Elite League. He was a 30% shooter in the regular season from three. Not great. And that is definitely a concern, especially given the fact that Taylor Hendricks, Jarris Walker, and Cam Whitmore, all who were available at that slot, who I personally would have preferred them to pick at the time, all shot better in college than Asar Thompson did from three in the Overtime Elite League. But I'll tell you what, one thing that gives me hope that Asar Thompson can become a good shooter is in the Overtime Elite playoffs, he bumped that three-point percentage up to 39%, which is, if he can shoot 39% from three in the NBA at any point in his career, that would obviously be a home run pick. That would be one of the keys to Asar Thompson reaching his ceiling and being that actual home run pick that Troy Weaver said that he was going to shoot for, obviously, or swing for. And you already mentioned it, Asar Thompson, he's going to come in. What I like about this pick, too, is having Cade Cunningham back and having Asar Thompson, their defense is going to be exponentially better from day one, presuming they're both healthy, than it was last year. You're not going to be looking at the Detroit Pistons as one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, or at least not as bad as they were last year. And Asar Thompson, an athletic wing who can guard the perimeter, the Pistons needed wing depth. Obviously, they have Bojan Bogdanovic right now, who is a three-point sniper, but he's not a defender, and he's older. They're looking to get younger, they're looking to get more athletic, and they're looking to get people who can score in transition. I mean, imagine Cade, Jaden Ivey, and Asar Thompson coming at you on the fast break. There's going to be lots of explosive plays, I will say, and like I said, the more I talk myself into it, the more I look up on him, the more I hear people I trust seeing Asar Thompson's praises, the happier I get about this pick.
Yeah, and also they weren't done there. Troy Weaver traded up again in the first round, and he traded two second-round picks and 31 for 25, and selected Marcus Sasser out of Houston, who again 6'2". He's the size of a point guard, but he doesn't play like a point guard. He's a two guard. He can shoot the hell out of the ball. He's a nasty perimeter defender. And you look at what the Pistons need too with Killian Hayes. And I saw the tweets last night. Goodbye, Killian. This is it for Killian. Guys, you have to understand too, and although you may be correct there, we'll see what Killian does this season. The other part of it is they can technically play together. Like Marcus Sasser isn't the playmaker Killian is, and they're both great defenders. But you got Marcus, who is a hell of a shooter, and you got Killian Hayes, who's a hell of a playmaker and defender. Those two guys can share a backcourt. Killian Hayes is 6'5". Like Marcus Sasser and him can play together. But regardless, Marcus Sasser, I love it. I do, because you look at the point guard depth, at least on this team. I mean, as much as we all love Corey Joseph, yeah, you got to get some more depth there.
Do we love Corey Joseph as much as we love Corey Joseph?
No, I'm kidding there. But regardless, Killian Hayes, still question marks with Killian. You take Marcus Sasser. I love the pick. What are your thoughts on it when they traded up and got him?
Well, for the record, I still want Killian Hayes gone under just about any circumstance, because I still believe, even though Killian Hayes does have some strengths, that if you can't shoot 40% from the floor and 30% from three, all of that weakness alone basically outdoes all of the strengths you might have. But to further your point, I can see a scenario in which Marcus Sasser and Killian Hayes can play together because they have different skill sets. If you're worried about shooting for the Detroit Pistons, Marcus Sasser already has it in droves. He shot 38% last year at Houston from three, which is very, very good.
On like 6 attempts,
On 6 attempts. With Asar Thompson, you worry about him developing more of a consistent shot. With Marcus Sasser, you already know that he has one. And you mentioned that Marcus Sasser, despite being 6'2" and listed in some spots as a point guard, he's not much of a playmaker. He is looking to score, and he is a tenacious perimeter defender. He's one of those guys that will just be a pest defending NBA guards. He's going to be one of those guys. And I saw Sean Murphy kind of say this about Anthony Black, but I think this applies to Marcus Sasser. Some NBA veterans are not going to want to play against a young, energetic Marcus Sasser going hard at them
Right.
the whole game. So that all that being said, they could play together. Killian Hayes has better size and he's a better playmaker, and Marcus Sasser can shoot and Killian Hayes obviously cannot, and they both can defend. Obviously, I still want Killian Hayes gone, but that might be that pairing that he needs in the second unit when it comes to the point guard and shooting guard. I can talk myself into it. I don't love Killian Hayes still, but I can see the pathway, Jeff. I can see the pathway.
You sound like a lot of Pistons fans often.
I know.
There's always a pathway
There's always a
everybody can
pathway.
see.
So is Sasser, just because I watched a lot of film on like the top, like the lottery guys. I didn't watch a lot of film on like behind that. So is Sasser going to be a guy that comes in and is able to play make too, or do you think he's going to be a guy that comes in as kind of like that burst off the bench, kind of like the campaign in Phoenix?
He's more of a burst off the bench guy, but also he's a better defender than Campaign. But for Sasser, he's a scorer. I think the playmaking side for Marcus Sasser is something that's not the reason why you drafted him. You look at the shooting. You look at the tenacious perimeter defense that he provides. Also, like, there's a lot of things. You bring a guy like Marcus Sasser off your bench, if he turns into even a dependable NBA player, that's going to be a guy you like in the playoffs. Like, guys that can come off your bench, defend, shoot the three. Not saying he's Derek White, but guys like that come off the bench or can start. We'll see what Marcus Sasser's career looks like. But right now, I like the prospect. Now we'll see what he becomes.
Well, I mean, you even mentioned Derek White. You're not comparing him to Derek White.
No,
but
role.
If he becomes a Derek White type player at pick number 25, then it will have been a successful pick for the Detroit Pistons. And I think I like the pairing of Asar Thompson and Marcus Sasser as a pair more than I did when I had just known that the Detroit Pistons had picked Asar Thompson at number 5. As a pairing, I think they complement each other well, but we shall see. They both have a little bit in some ways of what each other doesn't. Hopefully they can impact the Pistons greatly even as soon as this season.
Welcome back to the Morning Woodward Show here on the Woodward Sports Network. I'm Jeff Iafredi. Alongside me, Sam Flannel, as always. We got JB, we got Lucas Klotz, and joining us, we have a very, very special guest. It is my honor to welcome in the Hall of Famer, the all-time winningest head coach in Michigan State basketball history and Big Ten Conference history, Tom Izzo. Welcome to the show, Tom. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem. We understand you're participating in the Pro-Am on Wednesday and the tournament that starts on Thursday as well. Other participants include Barry Sanders, Kelvin Johnson, Dylan Larkin, Chris Webber, and WWE superstar The Miz. And shout out to Rocket Mortgage Classic for putting it on. But can you just talk to us a little bit about the event itself and what you're partaking in exactly?
Well, I'm also playing the 313 tomorrow, which is a kind of a fun event that benefits a lot of people, a lot of families in Detroit. And I just think the bottom line is anytime we have good events in Detroit, I've said it since I got here, I'll say it till the day I leave here, and then I'll say it some more when I'm done. When the biggest city in your state is doing well, the rest of the state's doing well. And we all know that there was a time Detroit was booming, and then there was a time when we've really gone through tough times, and getting it back and getting people there and selling the great things we have and then raising money for certain things. Those are all positive as we try to kind of reinvent our city, which means reinventing our state.
Absolutely. Coach Izzo, to reflect on last season's loss in the NCAA tournament in a great game to Kansas State, what are some things the team is focusing on this offseason to take that next step, both individually and as a team?
Well, one is to try to score one more point. One more point would have got us to the Elite Eight, which I think we could have got to a Final Four. But on a serious note, now it's blending a little more depth. We had no depth last year. A little more depth, blending some talented freshmen with some talented juniors and seniors. Making sure certain guys take a step. I think Tyson Walker had. Jaden Akins, I think, will be very, very important, taking a big step. And then we've got to get Malik Hall healthy. He had surgery in the spring, and it looks like he's really coming around and starting to shoot the ball now. And within the next couple of weeks, he'll start working out again. that was he was out almost all last year, in and out, and Jaden missing the first 12 weeks didn't help either. So he wasn't full go to the middle of January. So I think those two things, staying injury free, which is always hard to do, but maybe working a little harder. There's not only in the weight room, but in flexibility and doing some hot yoga and all the things that are fun.
And coach, as well, last week the Detroit Pistons, Troy Weaver, they picked 5th overall. They took Asar Thompson, a pick actually after his brother Amin. Are you familiar with the Twins? And if so, what are your thoughts on the Pistons taking Asar 5th overall?
Well, I'm familiar with them. As they were moving on through high school, everybody was familiar with them. Having not seen them a lot, they seem like great kids, both of them, and I'm happy the Pistons, I think the Pistons are putting together some good young talent, and strengthening up their guards, and those guards are going to be very important because you got to win with them, and so now I think they have a very good base. In the last 2 years, they've really, and I like the Sasser kid too from Houston. So I think they've had a good draft, and I think they're going to be an exciting team, and I'm looking forward to them because there's another group that when the Lions and the Pistons are doing well, I think we're all doing better.
And when you see the top 5 picks, too, with Scoot Henderson from the G League and obviously Asar and Amin from Overtime Elite, what are your thoughts now on just the variety of where players are coming from? And even last year, top 5, a lot of those guys were from the NCAA. But now with so much variety, what does it mean for college basketball, you think?
Well, I think college basketball is getting a little bit of a bad look on that in this standpoint. Guys, every year there's 5 to 8 guys that if they went to Northern Michigan or if they went to, a convent, they're going to be top picks. I mean, they're coming out. If the rule was they could come right out of high school, there's 5 to 7 picks that would have. So when people say they're getting better at Overtime Elite or better at this and that, I don't believe that at all. I really don't. I think, there's different places to go, but if you get to the point and you had a son or daughter and, you're still missing being in college. I don't care if it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. Starting your education and having a chance to come back, just being in a college campus. I feel bad for the kids. That's me. I mean, everybody say, they make a little money, they do a little bit. In the big picture, those are nothing. College helps prepare you. So I'm not sticking up for college. I could care less if they go there. But I don't listen to the theory that because they went there, they got better. Nothing gets better than the competition in college on a daily basis and what we can do. If you ask me, that's my opinion, only my opinion, but I think it's an educated opinion.
Absolutely, and very few people know more about college basketball than you, Coach Izzo, and I have to ask this because the chat is probably expecting this from me. I am as big of a Michigan basketball fan as you will find at this network, and if I'm being honest, some of my most exciting moments as a fan have come at your team's expense, but obviously I respect the hell out of the program you've built. You're the best Big Ten basketball coach of my lifetime. And you had some battles with Michigan, your team, especially under the later years under John Beilein. Tell me about some of those and if you got a little extra juice coaching against Michigan.
Well, rivalries are rivalries, and John and I used to laugh about that. I think what the big key is do you respect your opponent? I respected Juwan Howard. I recruited Juwan. But, of course, I did almost have a special relationship with John. We went through wars. He built Michigan like I built it here. We went, I don't know, I want to say 10 years against each other and maybe longer, in fact. And, we were getting to the point where they were getting the Final Fours, we were getting the Final Fours. Rivalries aren't rivalries until both teams are really good. And then they're rivalries. But it'll always be a rivalry, and yet Hatfields and McCoys, as I call it, is a fight, but if there's respect, then it's a good rivalry. And I think that there is respect, and And that's all that matters to me right now is, you get a lot of rivalries. In other words, Wisconsin became a big rivalry because us and them were playing for championship. Then Illinois, and John got there and it was Michigan, Thank God we're always in that rivalry statement. But the Michigan State rivalry, when they're in the same state, it should be a big rivalry. It should be something like you guys sit there and you're a Michigan guy and somebody else there's a Michigan State guy. And, you get to rip on each other for a week at a game. And then sometimes, like in football, you get to rip on each other for a whole year, and that's the fun of rivalries. They're more fun for you guys than they are us.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Tom Izzo, Michigan State head coach, the Hall of Famer. Thanks for taking the time, Coach. I got one more for you. Again, for you who have accomplished everything, how do you keep that competitive fire onto you to keep that motivation to keep going?
Well, I haven't accomplished everything. Got a lot of things to accomplish yet. I think that's what keeps me going. But every time you think because you won a national championship, then you look at Mike Krzyzewski's got 5 and John Wooden's got 10, and you realize you haven't accomplished nothing like that. So, that's what keeps me motivated. There's always somebody out there that has done more. And but my objective here is, yes, to win more championships. But my real objective here at Michigan State is to leave the place better than I found it, to, build it strong enough where the basement is really strong, and then the first floor is strong. And now as we move up the building, the more layers we can put on, then the less destructible it'll be. Because college sports is in a little trouble right now, I think, where we're at. And it's going to be interesting to see how the next couple of years go, and we're going to have to be very solid to stay with what you guys love, what I love, and what I think our fans love. And yet we got some people making decisions that are in a vacuum, if you ask me. And so that's my candid opinion. How's that?
No, it's perfect. Thank you. Again, thank you for taking the time, Coach. We appreciate your insight. We appreciate your time, number one. And again, thank you, and good luck on this next upcoming season.
Well, do me a favor, guys. If I took the time to be on your show, go do a little dance outside so that makes sure the weather's good for the next 4 or 5 days, because the city of Detroit needs it for the golf outing.
I got you, Coach. No problem. I will do. I got you. Appreciate it.